today, I say, you are looking at a changed Labour Party. A party under no illusions about the scale of the task ahead, but a party ready to grasp responsibility for getting Britain's economy back on track. Our mission is to rebuild from the foundations and deliver growth across every part of the country. The success of that mission rests on us working together to ensure that business and working people thrive. So I can promise you now, and you can hold me to this, with me, Keir, Rachel and Johnny and the rest of Labour team, you will always have a seat at the table. And I've already sat alongside many of you in the room to have a frank conversation about how our plans will enhance sectors across the economy. That is what you'll get from a Labour government. Honest, frank, open conversations about how we can boost Britain's economy for the benefit of both businesses and us all. Because with your help, we can invest in Britain's future, deliver better public services and drive forward the infrastructure we need for the benefit of everyone. And there'll be no last-minute surprises, no trying to pull the wool over your eyes. I tell you what, I feel a lot more comfortable in the company of business leaders than I do in the halls of Westminster. The historic halls of Parliament are not exactly welcoming to a working-class girl from Stockport. But I have always been amongst friends when speaking to business leaders. Like you, I've grafted hard. Many business leaders sat here today learnt through apprenticeships, adult education and on the job like I did. I've always admired true enterprise and true aspiration. Aspiration should not be isolated to those with certain connections or a certain background. Aspiration is for everyone, be it the council estate or the parliamentary estate, or the opera, or a nice bottle of wine for that matter. But for too long, the aspiration of so many has been dampened. For 14 years, Conservative ministers in government have overseen low productivity, low growth and lower levels of investment than any other economy in the G7. Private investment is falling. There's little confidence to get up and start your own business. No reason for investors from overseas to want to come and set up shop on our shores. Businesses of all sizes have been held back by a weakened national economy, more vulnerable to global shocks than other international competitors, and not rewarded from their government when trying to do the right thing. Never again can the Conservative Party credibly claim to be the party of business. Not when sky high energy prices are putting so many out of business, not when labour market pressures threaten to drag SMEs under, and not when businesses can't grow and flourish because they can't find the workers. Now, we recognise the scale of the challenge in front of us, and we know that we need bold ideas to deliver our guiding mission of economic growth, which is why we've committed to overhauling our planning system and to work with industry to build the homes that Britain needs. It's why our new Regulatory Innovation Office will mean businesses get quicker decisions on new products and services. And it's why we'll switch on Great British Energy, providing new UK jobs and vital energy security. We will introduce legislation to tackle the late payments crisis for SMEs and stop them stifling growth. We will replace business rates with a fairer system. And we will make sure that small businesses no longer get cheated out of procurement opportunities. And of course, Labour's New Deal for working people will be a key part of this plan for growth. As pro-worker and pro-business party, we know that high productivity depends on a strong labour market and strong workers' rights. Because we know, and you tell us, that a healthy and motivated workforce is good for the bottom line. The UK's outdated labour market regulations are constricting business choices and growth. And action is needed to help tackle labour shortages and keep more people in work. This agenda is an agenda that we want to build in partnership with business and trade unions together. In a matter of months, there will be a general election, and one thing is certain. If Labour are lucky enough to win that election, the next Labour government will face serious economic challenges from day one. We have made getting economic growth once again our number one mission. But we know that we're going to have to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at it. This process will require working hand in hand with you, business. And this must be a two-way dialogue, not a talking shop. Labour will play its part by delivering economic stability, higher skills and green growth. And we need business to play its part too. Our country has a great history, and I'm absolutely determined that we will have an even greater future. So I say, work with us, and let's deliver that future together. So without further ado, I hope you have a fantastic day, and it's my job now to introduce the sponsor of today's event, the Chief Executive of HSBC Innovation Bank, Erin Platts. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I'm Erin Platts, UK CEO of HSBC Innovation Banking. And I don't need to tell this audience that the UK is a global leader in innovation. But perhaps we don't celebrate and amplify that fact enough. And if there's one thing I've learned after 17 years of working here in the UK, sometimes we're a bit too modest. And I don't think in this case we should be. The UK innovation ecosystem is number one across Europe. We're number 3 globally, and the gap between us and first and second is narrowing. So at HSBC Innovation Banking, I'm really proud of the small part we've played to make that happen. We bank and lend to thousands of technology companies, life sciences businesses and funds, from early stage startups to scale-ups, public corporates, and everything in between. We do know that the economic backdrop has been challenging. The environment for technology companies has been challenging, but I do believe that there are many reasons to be optimistic. Because when it comes to the innovation sectors that will underpin our future growth as a country and economy, we absolutely have the ability to continue to lead, whether that's fintech or edtech, healthcare, life sciences, climate tech, or Gen AI, just to name a few. So the key question is, how do we unlock these opportunities? How do we ensure that the UK remains not just a great place to start, but to scale a business? And for me, I agree with Labour. The heart of the answer is really about partnership. Having policymakers, the private sector, regulators all pulling together in the same direction, really locking arms behind a common framework and then delivering against that together. So with that ambition, I'm now absolutely delighted to welcome to the stage the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you to our sponsors, HSBC Innovation Bank. It is a pleasure to be here and to see so many familiar faces. And it is a testament to the progress that this party has made under Kier's leadership to have all of you with us today. At this conference a little over a year ago, I was proud to launch the final report of Labour's Startup Review, headed by Lord Jim O'Neill. That report set out a roadmap to make Britain the best place to start and grow a business. That review, like this conference, embodied the spirit of partnership with business that will guide the next Labour government, based on a recognition that in a more unstable world, business and government must work together like never before, and that when they do work together, we can achieve remarkable things and rise to the most daunting of challenges, like developing in a matter of months a vaccine able to curb a globe-sweeping pandemic, creating thriving markets in domestic wind power by de-risking investment through contracts for difference, or even as great a leap forward as the creation of the internet. That spirit of partnership will be realised in government through an Industrial Strategy Council, revived and put on a statutory footing, guided by my colleague Jonathan Reynolds, and through a British Infrastructure Council, bringing together leading investors and government to help close the huge shortfall in investment in infrastructure upon which we all rely. This is all to make a simple point, that when we say we want to work with business, that there is no policy that we can announce, no plan that can be drawn up in Whitehall that will not rely on the engagement of business, we mean it. That this Labour Party sees profit as not something to be disdained, but as a mark of business succeeding. I want to set out today what a pro-business Labour government will mean in practice. I am an optimist about Britain. As Shadow Chancellor, the meetings I have had with many of you have been a real privilege to visit brilliant, creative businesses all across the UK. Even in challenging economic times, the work of entrepreneurs and engineers, investors, scientists, and so many more cannot fail to inspire, giving a glimpse of a better future for Britain. From Babcock in Rosyth building ships for the Royal Navy, to IAP's Advanced Propulsion in Gloucestershire, bringing academic expertise and engineering experience to the latest research and development in transport, to Sea Capture in my own Leeds West constituency, who are developing and trialling carbon capture storage technology at the frontier of the energy transition. Businesses working together across industries, propelled by the research excellence of our universities, to harness new technologies in a fast-changing world. But these are challenging economic times. I know that British business have felt that. More than a decade of stagnant growth and anemic investment, and the economic impact of pandemic, war, and supply chain disruption, all exacerbated by political instability, which in turn has fueled economic instability. Brexit without a plan, piling burdens onto business, the mini-budget sending the currency crashing and interest rates soaring, and the constant churn within government. 5 prime ministers, 7 chancellors, 11 plans for growth, each announced to great fanfare, but each achieving less than the last. Almost every month, we hear about another business choosing not to locate or list in the UK. Investment that we have missed out on to the benefit of a competitor. In August, we had the news that the chip designer, ARM, a genuine British big tech champion, would be listing in New York, not London. In September, Community Wind Power, one of our largest onshore wind developers, called a halt to development of its biggest wind farm yet, due to rising costs. Less than 2 weeks ago, the new British nuclear startup, Nucleo, dropped plans to build a plant in Cumbria in favour of France. These are the symptoms of economic decline. Britain needs change. Not just a change in government, but a new kind of leadership. In place of instability and uncertainty, a government guided by clear purpose, working with business, universities and our public services to achieve ambitious goals for Britain. Keir Starmer has set out 5 ambitious missions to that effect. To revive strong, sustained growth all across Britain. To decarbonise electricity supply. To cut NHS waiting times and boost cancer survival rates. To tackle crime and antisocial behaviour. And to break down barriers to opportunity. But of course, all of these missions are tied to that defining economic mission, because economic growth is essential for rising living standards and for funding strong public services. And growth, in turn, will rely on attracting business to invest and create jobs and create prosperity here in Britain. Economic success, economic growth, felt not just in lines on a graph, but in a job that pays a wage to support a family on, stronger communities with thriving high streets, money in the pockets of ordinary people, pride in goods and services made in Britain and exported around the world. But plans for growth in the decades to come cannot depend on the methods of the 1980s or the 1990s. As our world has changed, so must the relationship between government and business. Because while this Conservative government can only lurch further down the path of managed decline, in other countries, across Europe, Asia, Australasia, and in North America, a new economic consensus is taking shape. The US Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, calls it modern supply-side economics, but I prefer the term securonomics. Securonomics starts with the recognition that the world as it was before the 2008 financial crisis has passed, that the global economy is being reshaped in a new age of insecurity, marked by pandemic, great power rivalries, new technologies, and the climate crisis. That to champion enterprise in the 2020s and 2030s cannot mean turning a blind eye to these challenges, clinging on to economic dogmas of past generations. In this world, the first priority of government must be a country's security, including economic security. That must mean economic security for ordinary families, underpinned by a new deal for working people. And it must also mean security for our national economy. Let me tell you what that would mean for business. In the pandemic, we found ourselves dangerously reliant on China for PPE. When Putin launched his war on Ukraine, we saw the perils of dependence for energy on countries that do not share our values or our interests. And as we pursue success in new industries, from electric vehicle manufacture to quantum computing, we must learn these lessons to build resilience in the new age of insecurity. When I talk about economic security, I don't mean a retreat from the things that are fundamental to a dynamic trading economy. A market economy thrives on risk, on daring, on leaps into the unknown. But government's task is to offer the security that means a would-be entrepreneur can take that risk, that a new firm can make the leap and scale up, that a business can raise finance and invest with confidence. That calls for active government working alongside business to extend security, navigate those challenges, and seize the opportunities presented by a changing world. Pro-business and pro-worker, in the knowledge that each depends on the success of the other. Investing alongside business through a new national wealth fund, tearing down the barriers to industry and house building with a once-in-a-generation overhaul of our planning system. Because it is past time that government sided with the builders over the blockers, supporting small business, replacing our outdated system of business rates with a fair system fit for a modern economy, reforming our pension system to end the absurd situation in which pension savers in Canada are more likely to benefit from investment in British business and infrastructure than pension savers here at home. And yes, putting aside the culture war dividing lines to forge a closer relationship with our nearest neighbours and allies and ease the bureaucratic burdens on business. And it must also mean that our plans for economic success are built on the rock of economic stability. I will never play fast and loose with the public finances. Because when the price of food, of energy, and of housing soar, it is ordinary families that pay that price, and businesses too. So I will not waver from ironclad fiscal rules. I spent the best part of a decade as an economist at the Bank of England. I know the importance of financial and economic stability. And I know too the importance of strong economic institutions, the guarantors of our credibility in global financial markets. So we will respect the Treasury and the Bank of England, and we will strengthen the Office for Budget Responsibility through a new fiscal lock. Economic and financial stability are the most basic preconditions of economic security, and Labour will guard them with iron discipline. There is another dimension of stability when it comes to business. In Davos 2 weeks ago, I met with leading figures, not just from the financial services sector, but also tech leaders and companies powering the energy transition. They have huge ambition, and they want to know that Britain is a place that they can confidently invest in. But after 14 years of uncertainty under this Conservative government, investment has cratered. I have heard time and time again from businesses that what they want is stability, including when it comes to tax. And they are right. If we expect business to invest in Britain, then tax rates cannot shoot up and down like a yo-yo, according to each political whim. What Labour offers is a genuine pro-business tax plan, founded on a fair contract between a pro-business government and great British business. That contract will rest on the basic expectation that businesses pay the tax that they owe, backed up by a multilateral action for a fair tax system, a strong global minimum rate of corporation tax, a deal on the taxation of digital multinationals, and a concerted action to tackle tax avoidance. Alongside that will come a commitment from a Labour government to ensure stability and competitiveness throughout our business tax system. At the Make UK conference last year, I announced that Labour would conduct a review into how we can lock in stability and incentivise investment within the business tax system. Today, I can announce the outcome of that review. We have heard loud and clear the demand for clarity and certainty from business. So the next Labour government will maintain full expensing and the annual investment allowance. And within its first 6 months, a Labour government will publish a roadmap for business taxation, setting out our plans on business tax over the duration of the Parliament. But I want to go further. There have been 26 changes to our corporation tax arrangements in this Parliament alone. We can't go on like this. We reject calls from those on the right wing of the Conservative Party to cut corporation tax. Our current rate is the lowest in the G7, and we believe that a 25% rate strikes the correct balance between the needs of our public finances and the demands of a competitive global economy. The next Labour government will make the pro-business choice and the pro-growth choice. We will cap the headline rate of corporation tax at its current rate of 25% for the duration of the next Parliament. And should our competitiveness come under threat, if necessary, we will act. That means that business can plan today investment projects with the confidence of knowing that their returns will be taxed at a certain rate for the rest of this decade. And to those of you in this room who might be wondering, do we really mean what we say? Has Labour really changed? Will warm words today be matched by action in government? Be in no doubt. We will campaign as a pro-business party and we will govern as a pro-business party. But in our new age of insecurity, it is not enough, if it ever was, for the state to simply get out of the way. We need active government backing British businesses. And that must mean backing the industries where we already are a world leader, to build on what we do best, to tear down the barriers to success, and to reach for new horizons. This can be no time to rest on our laurels. Take our life sciences sector. It should be celebrated as the very model of successful partnership between government, industry, and higher education, making us a world leader in a sector worth trillions of dollars every single year, and a trailblazer in developing the COVID vaccine. And yet, it is the victim of government neglect. In 2022, foreign direct investment in the UK life sciences almost halved, to the benefit of Ireland, India, Singapore, and Belgium. This week, we have published our plan for the future of that sector, a plan to boost investment, innovation and jobs in a crucial industry for our future. Where the last Labour government laid the foundations for the sector's success over the previous decade, the next Labour government will go further. Let me give you another example. No industry contributes more to growth and to the exchequer than our financial services sector. London is a global centre of international finance. Britain is the second largest exporter of services in the world. Financial services accounted for 12% of the UK's economic output, providing £100 billion in tax revenues last year alone. It employs 1 million people, 2/3 of them outside London. And yet, too often, we treat financial services as a problem to be solved, not a national asset to be championed. Before entering politics, I worked in finance. And when I meet with business leaders and investors in the sector, I hear real ambition, not just for their businesses, but for our country too. A strong financial services sector drives growth and innovation, but it does so much more. Every day, the sector gives the spark that lets new homegrown businesses start up and scale up, provides the financial security upon which ordinary families rely, and drives investment into our energy transition. At the end of last year in Edinburgh, I announced the launch of Labour's review into the future of financial services, guided by the work of our Shadow City Minister, Tulip Siddiq, supported by an advisory panel including John Kingman, Shriti Vadera and Nigel Higgins, and informed by the experience of leading figures across the industry. That review sets out the framework for Labour's approach to the sector. I want to thank them all for their work. Yesterday, I was proud to launch Financing Growth, Labour's plan for financial services. It includes detailed proposals to drive the industry's growth, not just in London, but all across the UK, to maintain Britain's global competitiveness, to reinvigorate Britain's capital markets, to take advantage of the potential of artificial intelligence and new technologies, and to power ahead with our energy transition. This report is a statement of intent, a strategy for success, and a proud commitment to the future of our financial services sector. Britain's history is as a great, enterprising, innovating country. That can be our future too. Together we can achieve great things, stand tall in an age of insecurity, and power ahead in new and growing industries, industries that were unimaginable just a generation or two ago. It will rest on a partnership, a contract between government and business. Know that in Labour, you will have a government that respects business, a government that will never put Britain's economic stability at risk, a government proud to say, we understand British business. We are on the side of British business. We will back British business every day and every chance we get. Let's change Britain together. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're going to take some questions from the press before moving into a Q&A. So can I take Simon Jack from the BBC first?
Thanks, Chancellor. 2 days ago, you told us that you had no intention of reinstating a banker's bonus, a cap on bankers' bonuses, and yet 3 months ago you tweeted, "Today, in the midst of the cost of living crisis, the government is scrapping a cap on bankers' bonuses. It tells you everything you need to know about this government." How can the people here trust your pledges when you can change your tune about something you seem to care about so much so quickly?
So when the government scrapped the bank bonus tax, we didn't feel that that was the right priority in that budget. But what I hear loud and clear from business, that what it will take to get them to invest in Britain is stability. And the last thing we need is more chopping and changing. And the truth is that in financial services, there are a lot more rules and regulations and safeguards in place than there were before the financial crisis. So, for example, banks have to put aside much more capital than they did before 2008. And there are much stronger rules about clawing back bankers' bonuses. So we didn't think it was the right priority. It wouldn't have been my number one priority in that budget. But the chopping and changing has got to end if we're going to give stability to business. And that's why we will not be bringing that back. Thank you very much. Beth Rigby from Sky.
Thank you, Shadow Chancellor. You've made an incredible effort to rebuild trust with business and voters on the economy, and you're now in touch and distance of becoming Britain's first female Chancellor. But your pledge to spend up to $20 billion a year on green energy has become an albatross around your neck. The Tories are hammering you on it, and it threatens to unravel all the hard work you've done to be trusted with economic competence. Do you acknowledge the problem, and are you planning to drop that commitment after the budget? Thank you.
Well, I know there are big opportunities to invest alongside business in the jobs and the industries of the future. And there's a global race going on for jobs in carbon capture and storage, green hydrogen, small modular reactors, floating offshore wind. And we need a government that backs business, which is why things like the National Wealth Fund that we've set out are so important. But it is also absolutely essential that all of our policies are consistent with our fiscal rules, so that we wouldn't borrow for day-to-day spending, we would get debt down as a share of GDP, and then only subject to that would we invest in the things that can help grow our economy. And the Green Prosperity Plan is no exception to that. All of our policies will have to be consistent with those fiscal rules. There's at least one more fiscal statement before the next election, the budget on March the 6th, possibly another one in September in the autumn. So we will set out our plans and ensure they are consistent with those fiscal rules, because they will always take precedence to guarantee the security, the economic security of family finances and of businesses as well. Thanks, Beth. Can I take a question from Paul McNamara from Channel 4?
Morning, Shadow Chancellor. You pledged £28 billion for green investments. Now it's an ambition, not a pledge. Just 3 months ago, when the Conservative said they were scrapping caps on bankers' bonuses, you tweeted, quote, "It tells you everything you need to know about this government." Now you seem to agree with this government. Yes or no, can you at least appreciate why the one thing that keeps on coming up again, time and time again, in focus groups is your party, your leadership, doesn't seem to know what they stand for. You seem to be turning all over the shop.
My number one commitment is to fiscal and economic stability, and I won't do anything that plays fast and loose with the public finances, because when you do so, you play fast and loose with family finances and create uncertainty for businesses as well. 2.5 years ago, we had not had the mini-budget. Interest rates were at 0.1%. The bank base rate now is at 5.25%. The servicing of government debt, the interest on government debt, is significantly higher than it was. And so, of course, we have to adjust our plans in accordance to the circumstances that what we will inherit. But the thing that I can absolutely guarantee to voters and to businesses too is that economic stability, financial stability will always come first, and that's what you get with Labour, very different from the Conservatives who have played fast and loose with our public finances.
Is that a yes or a no?
The thing that we can guarantee and that voters can have absolute certainty on is that everything will be done according to our fiscal rules. Thanks, Paul. Can I take a question from Chris Hope from GB News?
Thank you, Chancellor. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that by 2027-2028, a fifth of Britons will be paying higher rate income tax, one in four teachers, 1 in 8 nurses, because of what's called fiscal drag. As Chancellor, will you lift thresholds to stop this happening?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last bit. Sorry.
As Chancellor, will you lift tax thresholds, income tax thresholds, to stop nurses and teachers paying the higher rate of tax?
So the tax burden is now at the highest it's been in 70 years, and under the most recent forecasts, it's set to go up for each of the next 5 years. I've made no secret of the fact that I think that taxes on working people are too high, but I won't make any commitments that are not fully costed and fully funded. And so while I would like taxes on working people to be lower, the most damaging thing you could do is to promise tax cuts that end up crashing financial markets and sending mortgage rates soaring, which is what the Conservatives have done. I will never make that mistake. Thank you. I'm going to take a question from Jim Pickard at the FT.
Shadow Chancellor, in the autumn of 2021, you announced that you were going to conduct a review of every single tax break in Britain, and because you said there were too many loopholes for business. Now, of course, business will welcome your pledge to keep the headline rate at 25p on corporation tax, but after 2.5 years of looking at these tax loopholes, have you not found any, or are you holding them in reserve for stealth tax rises after the election?
Well, I've set out 3 closures of tax loopholes that I think you're aware of, Jim. First of all, if you make Britain your home, you should pay your taxes here, and under Labour you will. We will get rid of the non-dom tax loophole and replace that with a fairer system for people who are genuinely in the UK for short periods of time. We would get rid of the tax loophole whereby private schools don't pay VAT and business rates, and put that money into all of our young people, the 93% of them who are at our state schools. And we would close the private equity loophole, whereas where bonuses are not taxed properly. So those are 3 loopholes that we've already announced that we would close, and we would put that money into funding our essential public services. I'm going to take a question from Martina Petito from The Sun.
Thank you. Former Siemens boss and now Labour advisor says the UK risks steep decline without the 28 billion pledge. Do you agree? But also, you talk about the importance of your fiscal rules, saying they take a priority. Were they then not a priority when you announced the 28 billion figure? Was there a mistake?
Well, when I announced, made the announcements in the conference in 2021, I also, as you will remember, announced the fiscal rules, that we would not borrow for day-to-day spending, that we would get debt down as a share of GDP, and then only subject to that, to invest in the things that would grow the economy. And all of our policies are subject to the fiscal rules that I've set out in that conference speech, including the Green Prosperity Plan. It is fair to say that when I made that speech in autumn 2021, I didn't foresee the Liz Truss mini-budget and the damage that that would do to our economy and our public finances. The inheritance that an incoming Labour will get is not the inheritance that we would have chosen, but it is the inheritance that the Conservatives will bequeath, and we have to operate within our fiscal rules to ensure that family finances and also businesses are protected in a way that the Conservatives have not been able to protect those finances.
Do you agree with your Labour advisor, then?
Well, I think Jürgen Meyer is advising us on transport policy. Can I take a question from Lizzie Buchan at The Mirror?
Thank you. The former postmaster Alan Bates today has said that he refused what he called a derisory compensation offer from the government. Obviously, this is an issue that could end up in your in-tray if Labour wins the next election. Do you think victims are being treated fairly, and how much compensation should Fujitsu contribute?
Thank you very much for that question, Lizzie. The scandal and the treatment of the sub-postmasters is one of the biggest ever injustices in our country, and it is right that both the reputation of the sub-postmasters is restored and they are properly compensated for everything that they have gone through. In the budget in March, I think it is really important that the government put aside a compensation package to fund the sub-postmasters, and it is absolutely right that Fujitsu, as I think they have now accepted, must make a contribution given the damage that they are part of. Thank you very much. Can I take a question from Matthew Holhouse from The Economist?
Thanks very much, Matthew from The Economist. I'd like to understand a bit better your idea of how this sort of partnership is going to work sort of in the round. I mean, you've described it as a contract and a joint endeavour to tackle these grand national missions. Now, you've talked a lot over the past sort of year about Labour's side of that contract and all the things that you're going to offer business in terms of tax today and planning reform. It's not really clear what you expect businesses to do in return, what their side of the contract is. So can you sort of explain to the people here what you would expect or ask or require of businesses under a Labour government, which ways they're going to sort of have to change their behaviours and their decision-making, and what sort of tools you will have to compel that, or whether this is purely going to be a sort of, you'll introduce the incentives and hope that they follow through on them?
Thank you very much for that question, Matthew. Well, I set out in the beginning of the speech today the New Deal for working people, banning zero-hour contracts and fire and rehire, turning the minimum wage into a real living wage, some of the commitments that we've made to ensure that as the economy grows, ordinary working people benefit from that growth. I also set out in my speech today how we would work with our OECD partners around the global minimum rate of corporation tax and the fair taxation for global digital multinationals. So we would expect businesses to pay their fair share of tax, but we would want to give businesses confidence that when they make investments today, they know the rate at which they will be taxed in the future. Also, in terms of the partnership that we see, it is not just a Labour government saying this is what we will do. It is a genuine partnership where the ideas that we set out today, over the last couple of years, and I hope in government, will be shaped by business. So, for example, the Financial Services Review, where we had 10 leading experts from the financial services industry work with us on that review, is one example. The Life Sciences Review is another, where we worked with in partnership with industry to come up with plans for the future to grow the different sectors of the economy. I take also our British Infrastructure Council that met for the first time in November, something we've established in opposition but that would want to take into government to help bring investment into Britain. Those are examples of the way in which we would work in partnership, not just in opposition but in government as well. But in turn, we would expect business to meet their side of the bargain as well in ensuring that workers are rewarded properly and that they pay their fair share of taxes. Thank you very much for all of those questions. I think we're now going to move into Q&A. Amanda?
Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning, Amanda.
So, look, thank you for inviting me to ask you some questions this morning. I'm representing business here in the room. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm sure many of the businesses would say the same thing. And there are businesses, of course, from all shapes and sizes in the audience, and I think, it's interesting. It's going to be very interesting to hear some questions from those. So I'm just giving everybody advance warning that whilst I'll use the chair's prerogative to ask a few questions of Rachel myself, I will, of course, be opening up questions to the room, so please get those questions ready. I'm also an optimist about Britain. Aviva is a big company in Britain, and it's therefore very, very important that Aviva succeeds. So, I think that it is important that Britain succeeds. But Rachel, you alluded it to in your speech that the last number of years has been really tricky for the global economy. We've seen COVID, global conflicts, the energy crisis. So for businesses, obviously we see the challenges, but we also would like to see the opportunities. So what would you tell businesses in the room when they ask about those key opportunities and challenges over the coming years? What do you feel that are the key points that you want to make on those topics?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, Amanda, to speak about some of the big global challenges, whether it's the pandemic, war, the growth of tech and AI, or responding to the climate crisis. But there are also huge opportunities, and I think the global economy and technology means that we are in a sort of state of flux today. But that creates an opportunity for countries that get ahead of the curve to respond and create those jobs and that investment. And what I want to see is Britain to be the natural place for investors to come in a way that, frankly, with all the instability that we've seen in Britain these last few years, I think often businesses don't see Britain as a natural place to put investment. And you see that both within our domestic investment numbers, but also foreign direct investment coming into Britain. And that's why I placed such importance on the issue of stability after the chaos and the uncertainty that we've seen. But I think in a whole range of areas where Britain is already a global leader in financial services, where you work, Amanda, but also in creative industries, in life sciences, in AI and tech. We've got huge strengths, but we can't rest on our laurels. We need to be getting out there, fighting for business and encouraging that investment in Britain. And that's what I hope some of the plans that I've set out today and that Kier and I have been setting out in recent months will achieve.
Look, I think many businesses would echo stability, consistency is clearly important. It's very difficult to run a business in a backdrop of inconsistency. But let's focus on the financial services review, because you highlighted it in your speech there. Financial services plays a really critical role in the UK economy, employs many, many people, not just in London, but outside of London. And I guess what jumped out at me when I read the review was you focused on the role of the regulators and their role in enhancing international competitiveness of the sector. The jargon that is used for this is the secondary objective to promote growth and competitiveness, which, for the technicians in the room. So I guess you're not going to be surprised that many businesses here, Viva included, would be a strong supporter of this. How do you actually, though, envisage making this a real tangible reality and not just the jargon that we see written in many places?
Well, first of all, I think you're right to point to the fact that 2/3 of the million jobs in financial services in the UK are outside of London, and you've got a big presence in York and Norwich, and you'll know the value of having those jobs outside of London, access to a larger talent pool. And I think talent is equally distributed across the UK, but too often the opportunities are not equally distributed. And it is great that Aviva and other companies have got big financial hubs outside of London taking advantage of that huge talent. One of the issues that we heard loud and clear in the Financial Services Review were issues about regulation, and not just about the amount of regulation, but the duplicative nature of a lot of that regulation. So the FCA rulebook now is 10,000 pages long, and sometimes when new rules come in, old rules that it should be updating don't come out, and so you're having to comply with rules that have been superseded by new ones, but the old ones haven't been taken away. So we want some cleaning up of that rulebook, and we do think that secondary objective around competitiveness is important. Everybody knows that stability and regulation is essential for financial services. We saw what happened when that went wrong in the global financial crisis. But this is a sector which is very competitive, where other countries, particularly capitals like Paris and Dublin and also Frankfurt, are breathing down our neck for jobs. We must maintain our competitive position in the UK in financial services, and I think that regulation is a part of that.
Okay, but I mean, you recognise it's a tricky job, though, I guess.
I mean, of course it is, and you want to make sure that we still have the regulation that's there to protect consumers. But at the same time, it's really important that businesses are able to innovate, particularly with the growth of AI and tech. And one of the things we talk about in the Financial Services Review are opportunities around open banking and open finance. But that will require the FCA to work with the sector to experiment and try out new products, and we're very welcoming and encouraging of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that having a sort of stable regulatory environment is one of the attractive things about investing in the UK. So it's good to hear that, you're going to have that balance. But thinking about outside of London, and you touched on it there, so we have a big presence in Perth, in York, where actually we don't just have contact centres, we also have, very skilled actuaries, and I think that what you're referring to in sort of building up the regions outside of London is basically investing to make sure that there are those jobs, those skilled jobs outside of London. So how will you connect your public infrastructure policies on things like housing, transport, education with the business growth in the UK? How will you do that?
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, because if we want to create more jobs in areas, we need to make sure that there's the housing for families to live in, that there's the transport infrastructure to get people to those jobs, the energy to take from the offshore wind to the new homes that are being built, and also the water facilities. And too often, whether it's in Cambridge or most recent examples or elsewhere, elsewhere, there's not that joined-up approach. It's why I spoke in the speech today and Kier spoke at our party conference about backing the builders and not the blockers, to unlock the investment that we need to see by the private sector in housing, in energy and in transport as well, because unless we do that, we're not going to be able to realise our vision of having the highest sustained growth in the G7. So planning reform and grid reform is absolutely essential for achieving our ambitions, and it's also why we set up the British Investment Council, because it's really, really important that we work with big global investors to get that investment into Britain, whether that's through financing mechanisms, being more clear about the pipeline of investable opportunities, because we've seen business investment crater, and if you put that alongside what's happened to public sector investment, it shows that we are falling behind our big competitors around the world.
Look, I think a shout out for the insurance industry. The recent Solvency II reforms would actually unlock over £100 billion worth of additional investment into infrastructure. So I think we do look forward to working with this government and any future government on making that, turning that into reality. Now, I guess I've taken up enough questions for myself. So I'm going to open up questions to the floor. I can see somebody put a hand up over here. So please, when you ask questions, could you please say who you are, where you're from, and then your question. I'm going to take 3 questions, and then Rachel will answer those. Starting here.
Thank you very much. So I'm Rachel McEwen. I work for energy company SSE. We're headquartered in Perth in Scotland. And we're investing. We're in the midst of an investment programme in the UK of about £40 billion over the decade. And that's all on grids and renewable energy. Now, we've learnt the hard way that it is harder than it should be to get shovels in the ground. Now, we very much welcome Labour's mission. I mean, it's an almighty, heroic mission to achieve a decarbonised power system in the next 5 years, 11 months. But what are you going to do differently? So how is it going to be easier for us through consenting, planning, all the hard things, the detail that gets things done, that will actually deliver that decarbonised power system by 2030? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take another question. Are there other questions here? Do we have a microphone for here? Sorry. Whilst I'm waiting, there's a question at the back there. Somebody got their hand up? We'll start here and then we'll come to you.
Bob Wigley, Chairman UK Finance. Congratulations on the Financial Services Review, which we thought was very helpful. My question relates to your comments about corporation tax, and you've said you're going to cap the rate and that if the rate becomes uncompetitive, you would act. Did you decide specifically not to have a target to, say, keep in the bottom quartile of the G7 rates? I can understand why we wouldn't want to peg to where we are at the moment, which is the bottom of the G7. That might be imprudent as a prospective chancellor, but did you decide specifically not to go for a quartile ranking? Because that roadmap for long-term plans for corporation tax, as you rightly said, is what we base all our 20-year investments on.
Thank you. And then one final question at the back.
Good morning. Emma McClarkin from the British Beer and Pub Association. Our pubs are at the heart of their communities and their high streets and have been through a really tough time recently. Energy bills, rising costs of doing business. But how will the Labour Party support hospitality? How will it ensure the regeneration of high streets and rebalance bricks and mortar businesses against those digital ones so that we can ensure that the pub can stay at the heart of communities and busy high streets up and down the country?
Great, thank you. So, Rachel, you've got quite an eclectic group of questions there. Should we start with the question from SSE?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Rachel, for that question. And I think your question and your sort of frustration speaks to why it's so important to make these commitments about reforming the planning system. Because at the moment, there's something like £200 billion worth of projects that are looking for grid connections. That's private sector investment that is being held back by a lack of cables and by length of time and bureaucracy built into the planning process. So we want to speed up that planning process. We will update the list of nationally significant infrastructure projects, and we will fast track and streamline those to make sure that things actually happen. And we would use the creation of GB Energy, a wholly publicly owned energy company, to work with businesses like yours and also the grid to do a super tender for the cables that are desperately needed to connect new projects to the national grid and then to people's homes and businesses. And that's just some of the way in which we will make a difference in unlocking that investment that you and other energy companies want to make. The question from... Oh, shall I just carry on?
Yeah, carry on.
The question from UK Finance about corporation tax. At the moment, we are in the bottom half of the OECD corporation tax rates. I think the lowest is 12.5%, but with the new global minimum rate of corporation tax for multinationals, that goes up to 15%. So we are in the bottom half, and we are the lowest in the G7. And the reason I said if necessary we would act, we want to stay competitive. And so if we found that our competitive edge on corporation tax slipped, we would look at that. And that's why we've set a cap at 25% rather than locking it at that level, regardless of what our competitors do. I think that's really important. Emma from the Beer and Pub Association. Look, all of us know MPs as constituency champions, and everyone in this room, how important beers and pubs are for our local our high streets and communities. And all of us would have seen in the areas where we represent a decline in the number of pubs in the last few years, given all of the pressures that you speak about. Our big commitment to help businesses like those that you represent is the reform to the business rates and a rebalancing of business rates away from bricks and mortar properties to some of the online-only big corporations who are not paying their fair share of business rates. And so that's just one way in which we look to revitalise our high streets. But another part of that, and we spoke about it in the Financial Service Review that we published this week, is the commitment to 350 new banking hubs on high streets that no longer have a bank. And that's important for all local high streets, and particularly for the small businesses that operate on those local high streets. So that's another way in which Labour would look to work with hospitality and retail to reinvigorate our high streets again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions. Are there other questions? I can see somebody with a hand up here, and then one here. Sorry, if you're going to need to keep your hand up, I think, to allow the guys to get the microphones to you. Could you please introduce yourself and then ask your question, and then I'll come here.
Of course, James Alexander from the UK Sustainable Investment and Finance Association. Thank you for the Financial Services Review, which we thought was really positive. What would a future Labour government do that goes beyond what we think is the distraction of the 28 billion when the real prize is attracting huge amounts of, many multiples of that in private investment into the UK? So how would a Labour government work to attract that green capital into the UK, in particular by responding to the US Inflation Reduction Act and making the UK an attractive global destination for capital? Thanks.
Thank you. And then the question here.
Thank you, Shadow Chancellor, to you and colleagues for publication of the Life Sciences Sector Plan this week. We were delighted to see that the content really reflected the partnership approach you describe in terms of all of the issues that are important to our sector, from research to data right through to the NHS being an innovation partner. But my question is, that's great at the policy development phase, but how could you say a little bit more about how you ensure both that partnership approach and that cross-departmental approach will continue in government when tensions inevitably arise about affordability of healthcare innovations, where the payback in terms of health outcomes and increased productivity might not be seen for a few years?
Rachel, both of those feel like they're partnership-themed questions on sustainable finance and on life sciences. So I think this will be the last question.
Okay, great. Thanks, James, for your question. And there's two things I would say on this. First of all, the National Wealth Fund that we have announced is about leveraging in the private sector investment that you talk about in some of those industries of the future, from green hydrogen to carbon capture to renewable ready ports. And we've said for every pound of taxpayers' money that's invested in the National Wealth Fund, we would look to leverage in £3 of private sector investment. So much of this is about catalytic public investment to catalyse that private sector investment that we know is ready to go, but it's a very competitive global landscape where other countries are trying to secure that investment as well. But the other thing that I would point to is that the UK is already financing, through our financial services sector and the expertise that exists there, many of the big global green energy investments. And I really see London as having a big opportunity to be the global hub for financing big net zero, low carbon energy. And that will create jobs directly in the financial services sector, building on that expertise that we have, as well as financing the really important investments that need to be made to get us to net zero. Thank you very much for the generous words you said about the Life Sciences Review that Peter Kyle and Wes Streeting announced earlier this week in Stevenage. I agree that it could be transformative for the life sciences sector, and we're really pleased by the welcome it had from industry and also from higher education as well. It is one of our success stories, but the problem with some of the UK's success stories is that we then rest on our laurels and become complacent, and we can't be complacent about life sciences because, again, it is a competitive sector, as those statistics I used in the speech earlier about what's happened to foreign direct investment indicate. And so we're determined to work together, business, government and universities as well. But in terms of the NHS, again, the NHS is one of the reasons why we have such a successful life sciences sector in this country. But we could be using the weight of the NHS to do more clinical trials and get that investment in the UK as well. That would be good for the life sciences sector, be great for our universities, but it would also be fantastic for people who use the NHS to get access to the latest drugs and technology. And so I see this as a big opportunity for our NHS and for patients as well. Thank you very much for all your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Rachel, for being so frank and open with us today and sharing your insights. I'm sure it's given us all a lot of food for thought as we think about our planning for the next year. So with that, I'd like to bring this section of today's agenda to a close, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now take a short 10-minute break. Additional refreshments are available upstairs in the Duchy Suite.